Welcome to Seeking Numina. I'm your host, Elyse Wells, and I invite you to connect with the sacred wild within and around you through Numina, or sacred sites around the world, and the wisdom they hold. Together, let's remember the old ways, build relationships with land spirits, and dare to reach out to the Faeries. The sacred wild is inviting you to dance in the moonlight. Will you answer their call? Welcome to the Seeking Numina Podcast. I am your host, Elyse Wells, and today we're going to be talking about, are fairies dangerous? One of the questions I get the most when I talk about working with land spirits is, are they the same thing as fairies? And then the very next question is, so are they dangerous? And I want to talk a little bit about what land spirits really are, how I categorize them in the path of the sacred wild, which is my spiritual path that I teach. And I want to look at, are fairies actually dangerous? So we will answer all of your questions in today's episode. Now, the first thing I want to share is that there are categories to land spirits. The first category is the land itself. It is the land spirit. Think of it like that. It's possessive. The land has a spirit. And I think of it as a web underground, or I see it more connected with water. So maybe think of it as a current or as a little river that flows underwater. And the land has power. And that power has an area of effect. So the land spirits that I work with here, now you might notice a change in scenery. I am in Pennsylvania, where I come home to when I come to the US. This is actually the house I was raised in. This is my parents' house in Pennsylvania. And the land here is really the land that raised me. And before we started recording, I actually tried to record this episode outside in the woods, but everybody's weed whacking, mowing lawns. It is impossible. The sound is terrible. So I'm going to upload that version of the episode, which was really fun content, but just too noisy, as bonus content on Patreon. So you can enjoy that, patrons. You can join Elyse Wells on Patreon and get so many great bonuses. I would love, love, love for you to support the show over there and see that bonus footage of my woods, because it was really beautiful, and I got to share some trees that had fallen and who I'd known, but the noise is it's just terrible. It's just not audible. So all that to say, we have land underneath of us, no matter where we live. A lot of people say, I'd love to work with land spirits someday, as if they don't live on land right now. And unless you live on the moon or the International Space Station, you do. You have land ready to work with you. And the land is very willing to work with us. It's very open to working with us. So we'll talk more about that when we talk about if fairies are dangerous or not. So land spirits, they're under the earth. They have sort of an area of effect that has a limit. So here, my land spirits are the same ones that my neighbors have. The guy weed whacking, he's offending the same land spirits that I was trying to hang out with. But as you get further away, now I will say here we live on a hill. I've noticed that the land spirits I work with specifically here on this hill are not as present as you leave this hill, as you go up and back down and you kind of head into the valley and further in towards Lancaster in Pennsylvania. It's just a bit of a different feeling. But the land of Pennsylvania has its own feeling as well. So really, that is how I would have you start communicating with land spirits, is notice how you feel different when you leave your house. Where does it start to feel like you're in a different place? Maybe it's the end of the block. Maybe it's 10 blocks. But noticing that shift, noticing that area effect, you're now able to say, that's the land spirit, that gives you some indication of what you're trying to work with. And so that's the land spirits. They are very accessible through trees, particularly old ones, boulders, creeks. You also might even find caves on your land. So those beings that, like a tree, like a boulder, that have a deep connection to the land spirits, but are also their own spirit, I call the elders of the space. And the elder guardians or the elders of your space are the more accessible beings to that land, like a tree. You can go and talk directly to a tree. You know what you're looking at. You know what you're touching. Whereas when I say the land spirits, you might be like, well, that's a little vague. It's a little hard to comprehend. So the tree is a medium between you and the land spirits. And then the next category I think of is the fae. The fae, the nymphs, and the different categories within that. And nymphs are a complicated category. They're similar to fae because they have the same playful energy. They have that same, um, we even use this term to describe humans, but sprightly energy, like just the vivacity of nature and its expressions can be felt in interactions with the fae or the nymphs. Willie's jumping up to say hello. And when we really think about working with the fae and the nymphs and how they're different from the land, I would say the way to consider it is that they are mobile. They can move. The land spirits are determined to stay exactly in the land where they are. They don't really come up. It happens. It does happen. But they tend to be stationary on the ground. Lower energy in the sense that they're like an ant. You know what I mean? Like they're moving slowly. They don't really move. Like they're just kind of at rest. Whereas the Fae are more playful, they're more dynamic, and they're also the ones who are going to take retribution when the land needs you to. So if there is littering happening, if there is pollution going on by somebody, like maybe they're poisoning the water table with some chemical that they should take to a recycling center and they're refusing to. Those are things that the Fae will snap back and sort of stand up for the land about. The land isn't it, it's going to let you know if you try to build a relationship with the land and you're throwing cigarette butts out your car window when you're driving, it's going to let you know that it dislikes that. It's not going to build a relationship with you. You might get radio silence when you try to work with the land if you're treating the land badly in your everyday life. But the Fae are who are going to take retribution. And that is where people get their fear of the Fae from. I personally don't have a fear of the Fae, of natural places, or of where fairies are said to be, because I know that when I bring respect there, when I make sure to bring offerings, when I do my best to honor their legacy and listen to them, my catchphrase is listen to the land and activate your sacred wild. Why? Because when we listen to the land, we activate our sacred wild. It has to start with listening, active listening. So Faye respect that. They acknowledge it. They see you doing it, and then you don't really have anything to worry about. If anything, they start to become your greatest allies for protection. And there is one more category of land spirits that I include them as land spirits, but well, I'll explain why. This last category are the emissaries of land. And the emissaries are animals, birds, insects, creatures that live on the land that are able to relay messages on behalf of the land. So in the land, we get this quiet communication. You have to really listen, you have to be really present. But if the land has a message for you, if they want to connect with you or they want to let you know something, they might have to do that by giving you a bigger indication. So maybe they'll drop a tree branch in front of you but most of the time that's not accessible. And so they send an animal. And that's why I call them emissaries, because they're sent on behalf of the land. So we have a really great emissary of the land here in the woods named Eowyn. She is an orange female cat, which is rare, and she lives in the woods. She's always lived in the woods, and I feel like she's like the physical, visual spirit of these woods. And it's beautiful because when we come home, we give her food, we give her water, and I feel like that is an offering to the land just to be taking care of her. And it reminds me, of course, of my cat colony in Greece. which when I'm not in Greece, by the way, my grandparents come and take care of them every day. So, and they have unlimited food and water through their feeders outside and in their catio, which is open for them all winter. So they're not abandoned. Um, but that is sweet to me that no matter where I go, I have a cat that wants to be around me. So, and she's great. I spend a lot of time with her outside when I'm working with the land. And so those are your categories, and those are the land spirits, and that's who I recommend trying to communicate with if you are working with the land. And when we talk about spirit-led travel, when we talk about visiting sacred sites, we often overlook the fact that the land itself is a sacred site. When we talk about sacred sites, there's a lot of human attribution to them that we forget. You know, not always. Some of them are truly endemically sacred for their own power. But Stonehenge, for example, that's man-made. The ancient Greek temples, they're man-made. But the power they hold, the land that they have on them is powerful in and of itself. And the land spirits are ready to work with us to build sacred places. Anytime you create sacred space, you're building a sacred place. Even though it might be impermanent or it might be something you turn on and off, you know, maybe it's your dining table right now, but at 7 p.m. tonight, it's going to become your full moon altar. That's perfectly valid. That is how sacred places begin. When you set the intention to connect with your land and to bring that connection into your magical practice, that is how land spirits relationships can be grown, and that is how sacred places can be created. And that's something powerful I just wanted to bring in, as if this is, of course, about seeking sacred places. But I wanted to also give you these terms and these categories because when we work with sacred places and we seek them out and we visit them, and then, you know, what do we do? How do we engage? What are we expecting to feel? And these categories, not hierarchies, you know, they're not, emissaries aren't less powerful than the land, even though the land is, well, I don't know. Maybe that is a different way to think of it. That the land is kind of the all-powerful everything that runs through the emissaries, like a fox or a stray cat, and runs through the elders, like a little creek or a big boulder or an old oak tree. And when we tap into those plant allies, like the oak tree, or familiars, like a stray cat that does ritual with us, we're honoring the land when we acknowledge the land's connection to those beings. And so at a sacred place, and if this is a story that resonates, if you've had this happen to you where you've visited a place, sacred places tend to have animal emissaries that will show you around. There was a gardens I visited in Northern Ireland called Powers Court, and it actually used to be a famous rich person's estate, and it burned down, and so now it's just gardens, and it has a lot of really old trees. Some of these trees are hundreds of years old, and when you go through these gardens, there, well, when I went, this was almost 10 years ago now, there was an elderly dog who would guide you to each tree. And I remember it because this was before I really worked consciously with the land. I was a witch. I was practicing. I was, you know, moving through my motions, but I wasn't really working with the land in such deep, intentional ways like I am now. And it was really special to recognize that I had met an emissary of the land there in that dog as it showed me around. And I remember being led to each tree. Like some of these were trees I'd never seen before, like redwoods or sequoias. There was a huge eucalyptus tree, like massive, like 13, 14 feet, 15 feet high. And it was really special to be led by an animal. And we often have these experiences at sacred places. And if you've had one of these stories, or you've had a story of an animal showing you around nature somewhere outside, I would love for you to write in. You can email me, Elyse at seekingnumina.com, or you can actually press the text message function in the description, and I can share a story on the show. It would be great to share that because I think people forget that animals are nature. Like we're so used to certain animals, dogs and cats especially, that we forget that they're part of land, that they're part of the nature connection that we seek. And they're right there. Lily was literally just coming up to say hi. And it just is a little reminder anytime a cat or a dog or a bird or, you know, an animal acknowledges us, that we are worth acknowledging and that nature is seeing us and just waiting for us to see it back. And that's why we travel to sacred places, is to have that experience. And when we recognize that the sacred places were with us all along in the land that we live on, it can be a really powerful experience. And I hope today you feel more empowered after listening to speak to your land and be a part of the land a little bit more. Thank you for Seeking Numina with me today. I'm Elyse Wells, and I look forward to sharing more with you in our next episode. Thank you for Seeking Numina with me today. Join me at patreon.com/Elyse Wells to support this show and get access to a library of rituals, exclusive videos, meditations, and more. To learn more about my upcoming retreats, book a tarot reading, or learn with me in workshops, classes, or mentorship, visit seekingnumina.com.